Hello, welcome to The Horticulturalist. I am Matthew Lucas.
And I'm Stephen Ryan. And we post a video every Friday. So why not come on board, subscribe, press the alert button, and then you'll be able to keep up with all of our adventures.
Daring do. And if you have a question for Stephen Ryan, put it in the comments below and say where you're from in the world. And he, not I, will answer it in 60 seconds.
I'll do my very best. So please engage with us. We love it when we hear from our subscribers.
We do. It is always fun to hear what people are doing around the world. And talking of doing things from around the world,
yes,
which we're not, what are we doing today, Steve?
All right. Well, some of you who've been subscribers for a wee while will remember we did a garden walk around my garden.
Yep.
And we did that, I think, in early spring, maybe late winter, something like that. So we've decided to repeat the event, but at a different time of the year. So you can get a sense of some of the other things in the garden that are doing their thing, looking good, things that have gone off, all those sorts of things. So today's video is basically a garden walk to see what Tagurium is doing in the very early summer, basically.
Early summer. And it is cold and wet and miserable. So it might look a lot like the video that we shot 4 months ago.
Yeah, except hopefully there will be, in fact, different plants out. Even if, in fact, the weather seems the same, there will be a different range of plants available to look at. In fact, I'm feeling a tiny bit gentiana next to me here, for those who know.
Let's do a very cunning, quick flip, because there, ta-da, we have hostas.
Yes, a couple of hostas. As we said in our hosta video, grown in pots to keep them up away from slugs and snails. And we've got one called Middle Ridge, and we've got something blue behind me as well.
There you go. So we'll link the hosta video, because you don't actually have many hostas in the garden.
I don't, because the slugs and snails give them merry hell. So I tend not to, but I am getting to the point after doing that video at Gentiana Nursery, where I think I need some more hostas. So,
in your life?
Yeah, in my life. So I did buy a couple while I was up there, as you did.
As I did.
So once they get big enough, they're sitting in pots up at my nursery at the moment. When they get to look like this one, they'll come home and sit on the front steps for the summer months.
Excellent. Well, we shouldn't sit on the steps any longer. Let us now begin our tour of Tagurium in early summer and show you what's going on in the garden.
Let's do it.
Well, Stephen, we're at the drive to begin our escapade through the garden, but something has caught my eye, which is right here.
Yes, commonly known as Cape Fuchsia, Phygelius. It's one of those plants that is so easy to grow that I sort of tend to forget that it's even here, but it flowers for months. The honey-eating birds love it, and you can get them in a range of colours through the oranges, pinks, yellows, a whole range of colours, and it tends to sucker. So you end up with a drift of it. So even if I didn't want it anymore, it might be quite difficult to get rid of it.
I love it. You might find it common, but I love it. Where's it from?
It's an African plant. They call it Cape Fuchsia for a very good reason.
Oh, right, from the Cape.
Yeah, from the Cape, yes. Sorry.
Okay, so we're beginning our amble in early summer. What are the things to note? Now, what we should remind viewers is that we've made a video about this border over a 12-month period to show everyone how the border progresses.
Yes.
Anything that we need to note at the moment?
Well, possibly not in this bit, because it is basically going into its more sort of gentle summer phase at the moment. It flowers quite a bit in the spring. Then I have just a few things that do summer things for us.
Hypericum.
Yes, like the Hypericum Rowallane, which is coming out into flower now. And it's quite a showy shrub, and that'll flower for the next 2, maybe 3 months. So I'll get plenty of colour out of that over a period of time. And then it's really all about the foliages and things in the place as it stands. So again, there's a number of plants doing their thing as far as flowers are concerned. The umbelliferous plants that I have in the garden are doing their stuff. So Daucus, the monocarpic giant parsley from Madeira, I've got several of those flowering, so we'll pick up a few of those as we walk around.
And we have a film about what is a monocarp.
Yes, we certainly do. And so there's, you know, a range of things that are just looking nice at the moment. I find early summer one of those periods where your main perennial thing hasn't started to happen yet, and the spring flowering trees and shrubs are pretty well over. So there's this, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a hiatus, but it is definitely a slightly quiet period in the garden. It's a bit like the vegetable garden, in that your winter vegetables are basically over, but it's just that bit early to get your summer vegetables underway. So you have that little bit of a gap in the middle. So yeah, so there's areas that are looking pretty, but not everything.
But to that point, the thing that takes you through those periods is foliage and texture, isn't it?
Yeah, so early summer and midwinter, I rely highly on foliages, so it's the way it works.
So now what there is here is a beautiful little loop in your garden. It takes us back to where we are, but let's have a little wander down here because I feel
yes,
for us to see.
Well, I'm sure there will be. I think, Matthew, you'll have to lead on because my paths, apart from the driveway, are very narrow and do not lend themselves for walking next to each other.
Now, we've been through this because it's a considered thing, so we won't go into it again.
Yeah.
It does invite exploration. And if we swing round, baby, right round, ta-da, there is the Daucus. So what we might do is just camp here for a second and talk about that.
Good.
Well, there they are.
Yes. In fact, I think it's one of the most remarkable plants. It's sort of odd though. You spend several years waiting for it to do this, and there's young ones around it which will in fact replace it. But of course, once this finishes flowering, set seed, then the whole cycle needs to start from scratch again.
So the whole plant will die?
Yep, the whole plant will die.
Because it's a monocarp.
Because it's a monocarp. You know all about monocarps now. It seems to be a year for them this year because I've got at least 5 or 6 of them that have all decided to flower in the 1 year. So,
isn't that fascinating? I mean, is there a collective unconscious amongst these plants? Think, you know what, this is the year, let's all do it. Because they all obviously will get the chance to cross-pollinate because they're flowering at the same time.
Exactly.
So the DNA mix will be better and...
Yeah, potentially. And of course there will be a critical mass of seed. And we have discussed this before where, particularly with bamboos and things, they flower once and then die, but they all flower at once. So that means there's this huge mass of seed in the one season so that the things that might well eat the seed haven't got time to build up critical mass themselves to eat everything going. So it's a survival technique that works quite well.
Fascinating. Now, I will note that one of yours, the possums have loved, but it still managed to bloom.
Yes, it still managed to set. They didn't eat right down into the crown, so it's actually managed to bloom. And it's interesting because I recently was reading something about the plant, and I don't even remember in what, but they talk about it, using it as a fodder plant in Madeira, where it comes from. So they obviously feed it to stock. And I guess because it's in the parsley, celery, carrot family...
It's delicious.
It's delicious, but then so's hemlock, and that's deadly. So what can I say?
All right, well, let's carry on our perambulation, but that is beautiful. They're really tall too, aren't they?
Oh, it's a fantastic plant for impact in the garden. I just love them.
All right, let's leave the Daucus and let's carry on this gorgeous path. Obviously, the house is behind us.
Yes.
Gloriousness is left, right, and centre. Ah, that is the Tagetes lemmonii that we have.
Oh, the lovely scent.
Yeah, not in bloom yet.
And of course, growing all over the place in here, in this particular part, is in fact the golden hops. And so the golden hops have run up through everything. Yeah. So under there is a weeping holly, which will still be there when the golden hop dies down. And it's running up and around through everything else around the area as well. Very handsome plant, but not for the faint-hearted gardener.
And here we are, back on the driveway where we began.
Yes.
So let's carry on.
So that was one little loop.
One loop, and I think there are a few other things I want to show everyone. Obviously, your perennial border.
Yes, we need to go and have a look. Yeah.
Is in its early summer stage, which is quite interesting.
Yes.
And there are many other things which we are about to pass right now.
Yes.
So under the shade of your
Chinese elm.
Sclerotic diseased elm.
Variegated.
We've made many a story about this variegated elm, which is beautiful. We've also done a story about this extraordinary climbing plant.
Yes, look at that.
But it's in bloom. So why don't we just, again, pause and have a little moment with this rare and fabulous thing.
All right.
Now, we did cover this in our rare climbers story, so we won't go into it in too much detail, except, of course, then it wasn't in flower. No. So tell everyone what it is.
All right. It's a plant called Semele androgyny, and yeah, that leads to all sorts of questions. It's in the asparagus family.
Yes, mad.
So it's a perennial climber, and eventually the old stems that have worked their way up into the tree, after they've flowered, done their thing, will slowly die down, and you'll have new shoots coming from below the ground. So it produces a cluster of shoots at ground level, just like an asparagus would. And when it grows up through the trees, it produces these amazing little lemony yellow flowers that sit around the edge of what most people would assume was a leaf. Yeah. And of course that gives it away, because that's not a leaf, that is a phylode or cladode, which is actually a modified stem.
Ah.
And so hence the flowers are on there, but it doesn't produce any real leaves, so it photosynthesizes through its modified stems.
What a mad thing, and the flowers are quite odd. We'll come in and show you closer. Now, it needs a friend, doesn't it?
Well, it seems to. I mean, when I first got the plant, because the name androgyny would tend to suggest that it is of both sexes.
And doesn't need a friend.
And doesn't need a friend, but because it has male and female parts within the plant. But I'm beginning to wonder, because this is the second or maybe third year it's flowered, but it's produced no seed. And what it should do is produce bright red berries, just like an asparagus does, around the edge of the phyllodes. And I've seen one in Ireland doing exactly that, but it may well have had two plants growing together, I don't know. But mine has never produced any fruit, and I've got a friend in the Dandenong Ranges who also has one, and we may have two of almost the only specimens in Australia of this remarkable climber, and I probably need to take mine to meet his, or vice versa, with some pollen to see if we can get one of our plants to start producing seed, because that is the way to propagate it.
Yeah. So you need a climbing asparagus stud farm.
Yes, well, something similar. But I think it's a wonderful plant, always creates lots of comment in the garden. Everybody wants to know what it is. And
no one can have it.
No, if I could only get seed from somewhere, I might have to go back to the Canary Islands.
Let's carry on our ramble.
All right.
All right, Stephen, well, leaving our androgynous friend behind, let's go and have a preamble around your perennial border, because that is kind of, well, it's in an interesting state, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's actually doing a bit of what people call colour at the moment.
My goodness. Well, let's go to the colourful end.
Yes.
And just show everyone what is going on right now. And as we round the corner here, we will start to see all the wonderful colour.
Yes, here we go.
Now, of course, we have covered this border extensively.
Yes.
But what's going on right now?
All right, well, we've got the early summer things doing their stuff. So if we start from low down, you can see there's one of the yellow Arctotis daisies doing its thing. And I have to say they're very useful, but you have to spend a lot of time deadheading them if you want to keep the flower show going. And some people might not like the combination, but I actually quite like the combination of a reasonably rich yellow going up to a very rich pink. So we've got one of the Alstroemeria hybrids, or Peruvian lilies, that is making a complete takeover bit of the border.
And they can be weedy in this part of the world.
They can, and I may one day regret having planted it because they're quite hard to get out. But great cut flower, flowers for months, so they're really, really good value. And one of the structural part of the border is, of course, this variegated box bush that's trimmed into a ball. And flopping over the top of the box bush at the moment is one of the lovely Viticella Clematis, one called Polish Spirit, which I think is one of my favourite clematis. It flowers for months. So it started a few weeks ago, and it will still be in flower probably in 2 months from now. And I just cut it right back to near ground level every winter, and then it comes up. There's actually an obelisk under there, believe it or not, and then it flops over the box bush as well, and I think the combination is really good.
It is indeed. Now, if we cunningly
the camera around. Yes.
What you can see is the wonderful bronze foliage.
Oh yes, of this fennel. And again, we've mentioned this in our epic about the border, but the bronze fennel is one of those plants that I love to have in the garden, but you do need to manage it. So at the moment it's looking absolutely stunning, which is great because the garden's open next weekend.
A grey bronze, gorgeous.
And it's lovely, and it holds moisture in it because we've had rain earlier this morning, so it's got these little dewdrops of water all through it. And it will come out with the heads of yellow flowers probably in about 4 or 5 weeks. As soon as those flowers are getting close to finished, the whole plant gets cut to the ground.
Now, I did notice too, and again, we're going to very cunningly walk backwards, is that you have planted a new Sambucus.
Ah, yes.
And there we are. Let me just tilt the camera that way so we can see at the back.
Yes.
Lovely bronze Sambucus. When did you plant that?
That's been in probably only 2 years now, so it went in as quite a small plant, probably.
Because I remember us not having to stand on it when we were filming the border epic.
Yeah, so it's now got itself up to about 3 metres tall, and it's a dark-leafed version called Black Tower, so it has a comparatively vertical form. So even when it's bare in the winter, the bare sticks have a certain interest about them. So, and the dark foliage I like, it sort of picks up things like the pink of the Alstroemeria, the beautiful grey of the cardoons, which are coming up towards flowering at the moment. So there's oodles happening in this border.
Cardoons there. That's going to be an amazing sort of purple bronze moment to frame the back of the border. Now, this path takes us on to the veggie garden, which is hilarious, where we spent so much time. But there is something in there that I noticed.
That you wanted to talk about,
Let's go and look at that.
All right.
Now, we often chuckle that in your Gardening Australia presenting days, you had to spend a lot of time in the veggie garden. So
yes, they seem to want me to engage with vegetables more than they wanted me to engage with ornamental and flowering plants, but anyhow, there you go.
But you do love an ornamental vegetable or a leafy vegetable that does gorgeous things. And there is a prime candidate.
Oh yes. Yes, let's go and have a look at a particular plant that I actually thought I had lost. So I thought it was gone from my life, at least until I could get seed from somewhere else.
Now just behind us, what is that massive growth there?
Oh, that's Jerusalem artichoke bed. They take up a whole bed on their own.
Yeah, you better love them to have that much space.
Yeah.
Broad beans here, we did a great video about those.
Yes, and they've been cropping really well this year. I'm very pleased with my broad bean crop.
And here is the thing now, we're gonna...
Oh, here we go.
We're gonna flip the camera and have to squat down, so bear with us. So this grabbed my attention as we were walking past. What is it? The foliage is incredible.
All right, well, it's a plant I got seed of donkey's years ago.
Yeah.
And it grew in my vegetable garden for years. The leaves are actually edible, so you can mix them through a salad. Or you can if you like.
No, the garden's open this weekend.
Yes.
I won't pull a bit off.
No, let's not destroy anything in the garden. Now, it's commonly known as purple Orach, and the green version of Orach is in fact basically a worldwide weed. You'll see it in waste ground in all sorts of places, but it's been well known as a vegetable right back. And in fact, they found bog men who were
bog people
who have had remnants of Orach in their stomachs when they've been preserved in the bog. So it's a well-known vegetable from way back, but as an ornamental in the garden, it's fantastic. It's an annual, generally sells seeds, but for some reason or another, I managed to eventually lose it out of the garden. And I don't think I've had a plant pop up for about 4, maybe 5 years. And then suddenly one erupts out of the garden, all on its little lonesome. So I'll now be able to start off again. Once this starts to seed, I'll be able to collect the seed and replant the purple Orach.
Beautiful. Now, where is it from originally?
Well, it's European, but it's all over the world now. It's in a genus called Atriplex. This one's Atriplex hortensis, rubra in the dark leafed form. And the common weedy one with the green leaves is often known in parts of the world as fat hen. Chickens and things love it, so you can throw it in for them to eat, and maybe that produces a fat hen. I don't know.
But you could also just use it as a decorative annual.
Oh, in fact, most of the time I didn't grow it in the vegetable garden when I had it. It tended to be something that I would sprinkle seed around through the ornamental parts of the garden and enjoy it as a foliage plant and just pick the odd leaf off to throw through a salad or something like that to oomph things up a bit.
Oomph things up. Now, talking of salads, what might cause scandal when your garden is open this weekend are all your lettuces that have gone to seed. But let's just go and have a look, because they look so beautiful.
I think they're fabulous.
It's a great idea to use lettuces in a different way in the garden. Come on.
All right.
So, Stephen, I'm just loving what you've done with your lettuce. Now,
or what I haven't done.
Well, this is the thing. Is this considered? Is this accidental?
I would say it could be seen as a little of both, because I realised that this crop of lettuce was going to be past its usable best by the time my opening was coming up for the garden.
Right.
And so I knew quite some time ago that I had two choices to make. Either pull it out and start another batch, which would have been young and probably not that exciting by the opening day, or just leave it in situ. And I might add, I'm still using some of the leaves out of it, so it's not a complete waste at this stage. And I think with these different mixed lettuces, it actually is quite splendid.
I think it's because they're amazing pyramids of bronze, lime green, and like a more of a mid-green, and it looks absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
Thought.
Yeah, and I might add, there's other advantages to this. Not only will this look attractive over the opening, and it'll give some of the vegetable people something to whinge about, but I'll also be producing lots of flowers over the next few weeks on these plants, and that will be a good pollinator attractor, and I can collect my own seed and start off my next batch of mixed lettuces without having to buy them.
Ah, there you go. All right. Well, let's not spend too much more time
in the vegetable garden, yes.
Right. Off we go. All right, leaving the fabulous sprouting lettuce behind.
Yes.
On through the veggie garden. And another film that we made recently with Lyle down at Rorama Nursery was Sonchus. And yours is in full bloom.
Yes, looking stunning.
Like $1 million. So let's wander up here.
Yes.
And there is this wonderful bronze Berberis. We've done a Berberis.
Yeah, we have indeed.
Next to a yellow Hypericum, which looks stunning.
It's lovely. I think yellow and burgundy foliages look fantastic together.
What's the Hypericum?
It's one I bought years ago as Grandiflora, but it's had a name change and I can't remember what the other name is at the moment. Okay, I'll send it to you.
Let's spin round, baby, right round, baby, right round. Look at that, Sonchus. Now, give me 1 sec. Let's park the camera and talk about this.
All right.
Well, now, we were down at Rorama Nursery quite a while ago.
Yes.
And Lyles were all in full bloom. Now, obviously, he is down in the plain.
Yes.
And closer to the water.
Yes.
So the climate's very different. But it was months ago.
Oh, yes. And in fact, mine behind me tried to flower not long after Lyle's were.
Oh, right.
And then we had a late frost. Right. Which took most of the flower spikes out of the plant. And I thought, oh, that might be it for this year. But lo and behold, it's decided to do it yet again. So it's thrown out a whole pile more flowers. Now, this one is Sonchus palmensis from La Palma Island in the Canary Islands. And the finer leafed one right behind it, which we may have to take some close-ups of, also coming out, is canariensis. So
where's that from, Stephen?
The Canary Islands as well. But whether, I doubt that it would be on the same island as palmensis, because I've got a funny feeling these two will cross-pollinate, which they obviously wouldn't have been able to do in the wild if they're not on the same island. So
let's not linger, because we have made a video about that. We've also made a video about this beautiful tree.
Yes.
Which is also just coming into bloom.
Yes, the Lyonothamnus, the Catalina ironbark, just about to flower.
Excellent.
And I had a visitor in the garden from North America about 3 weeks ago, and he was so excited to see this plant here. And he said, my specimen is better than the one in the Huntington Gardens.
Ah, well, all you need to do is propagate it.
Yeah, if only. I'll get there one day. Don't you worry about that.
Let's carry on our ramble.
All right, off we go.
Leaving that fabulous Sonchus behind.
Yes, and fighting our way through under the giant Brugmansia. Here we go. You're struggling with this. This is tricky. Here we go.
Brugmansia that we have. Oh, there's a flower for us. We have made many a video about this. So we're now coming out into your largest pond, and we of course have a water feature.
Yes.
Which I will link. And as we mooch around here.
Yes, here we go.
Now, what's happening here?
All right, well, what is happening here? We're quite close to the water here, so it can be quite moist in this particular part of the garden. So I've got mainly plants that do like it fairly damp. So there's Persicarias, there's Gunnera doing quite nicely. So all those sort of marginal plants that you would expect around a natural pond, I guess. And this one works like a natural pond because it's not lined. And so the moisture seeps up and the things that grow around the edge of it really enjoy their habitat.
But now, let's also just take a pause to look at something very large behind us. Another monocarp, then. Tis the season for monocarps.
This we've done before in one of our videos, and this is one of the giant Echiums, or the giant bug glosses, as you might call them commonly. And this one cohabitates with Sonchus palmensis because this is also endemic to La Palma. It is Echium pinnata, and it's again another monocarp. It grows 1 year. It's basically a giant biennial, actually, more so than a monocarp, because it grows 1 year, you get a big rosette of leaves, and I've got oodles of those around the garden. And then the second year, it will send up a towering flower spike with masses of little blue flowers, which the pollinators adore. And then after it finishes flowering, seed goes everywhere, it dies, and then I wait for the next batch to come up.
Amazing though, it is massively tall.
Yeah, well, they can get up to almost 20 feet in the old measurements. You know, we're talking about a seriously tall plant that does most of that growth in the one season.
I'm 6 foot and it's probably...
this one's only half as tall as you are again. but I have got another one over there that would be 3 times taller than you.
See that?
Yeah,
goodness.
they can get enormously tall, and they're great fun. I mean, they're the sort of plant that everybody sees and feels the need to comment on, because with this plant, size definitely matters.
I must just say too, and we'll show you more closely, but I'm just going to spin around now. The pond and the pond margin area is looking sensational at this season. All of the different textures and forms of foliage and plant that are loving this early summer season.
Yes, and it stayed damp enough this year, at least up until this time of the year, where we haven't got any summer stress heat happening yet.
Yeah. All right. Well, let us continue on this path, which takes us around the pond, past some things we've also visited before.
Yes.
Okay, the journey continues.
Yes, as we fight our way through the shrubbery.
So we're on the boardwork. Now, we did sorry to repeat this, we did a story about margin plants.
Yeah.
And we actually looked at these plants here because they're really quite interesting, aren't they? Because they look like sort of pineapple bromeliads
things, and they're actually an eryngium or sea holly. And I for years thought this plant liked a nice hot dry spot. Only to have one self-seed itself in the edge of the pond. I didn't plant it. It grew there of its own accord.
I didn't know that.
No, I had it growing in one of the borders further down into the garden. Yeah. And one decided to come up here, and this plant has done far better than any of the ones I've had in the garden. So it's basically growing in mud, and it's perfectly happy. So Eryngium pandanifolia.
There's that other massively tall Echium.
It is hugely tall.
Which is wonderful. All right, we're going to continue now underneath. What is this?
Well, it's a weeping green ash. So we're fighting our way through the ash tree as Matthew falls down, and we're coming through a narrow point. Dearie me. And we're coming down to a part of the garden that I renovated once.
Yes, and we made a story here about creating soil, but also about, I guess, tropical foliage leaf-looking plants, because here you have the wonderful
Tetrapanax.
Just forgot the name. There's literally a grove of them here.
Yep.
It's so beautiful to be under these massive leaves.
Well, nothing succeeds like excess, I've always felt. And Tetrapanax is one of those plants that once you put it in, you will always end up with more than you started with. So it is quite a remarkable plant.
Now, I'm going to stop here because this is the area that we covered in our soil story. And
yes.
We planted something.
Yes.
So let's just have a quick check-in and see how it's doing.
All right. Well, it was, I think, far less than 12 months ago that we were in here dealing with soil and working out how to create soil. And I'd actually planted this small Orach, which is settling in quite well. It's been through another winter, so it's come through what I would consider a moderately cold winter in our area. It's had a minor bit of damage on it, but it's settled down nicely, and I can see it over the next few months pushing up some new growth. But this is not a plant to put in for anybody who's impatient, because it is borderline hardy in this area. So this is Orach Rowallane from New Caledonia, and I think I'm quite clever to be able to grow it at all. And at its feet, and also just starting to kick away nicely now, is a dwarf form of Ilex cornuta, the Chinese holly, which will make a shrub about metre and a half eventually, probably about as wide as it is tall, and it will sit in underneath this Orach and the bamboo that's behind there, just fill that gap quite nicely. Anybody who just noticed that bird walk through, that is my tame wonga pigeon, which is not a native to this area. It comes from hundreds of miles further north, and this one blew down in a firestorm several years ago and has been living here on its own, sadly, ever since, and it's becoming tamer and tamer. And I really don't quite know what else to say about it. It's the strangest thing, my wonga pigeon.
Hello, wonga pigeon. That's funny, because the wonga pigeon follows us around. It's like a dog.
Yes.
And then starts to call, and bless you, wonga pigeon, the call can be quite loud and really sounds even louder on our soundtrack. So
yeah.
Wonga, it's walking in front of us in the path. It wants to follow us everywhere. So hopefully the wonga does not start wongering, because
yes.
the noise is quite loud. But now we're walking through one of the little gates.
Yes.
Because here was something else that I noticed, and I'll preamble around the fragrance being gorgeous. So here we are. I'm going to spin around once again and look behind us, that cloud of white. Perhaps you can't see it, but let's go and look at that.
All right, one of the early summer highlights in any garden would have to be the Philadelphuses. This particular one, which is a rather stiff upright variety, has semi-double white flowers, nicely perfumed, and is called virginal. So I don't know about the stiffly upright and virginal going together, but there you go. And a plant that I really am getting a great deal of pleasure out of is another monocarp potentially, although I haven't grown it long enough to be sure. And this is an endemic to the Madeiran Islands, and it's a lovely plant called Mustia walstoni, and Mustia is in the campanula family. So when it flowers, it'll have this huge big panicle of yellow upward facing split corolla but campanula-like flowers. But in a sense, who cares? The foliage is just so good, and this has only been in the ground less than 12 months, and it's made a serious feature in the garden. So I love this for its foliage. If it does die after flowering, well, then I'll raise some more seedlings and off I'll go again.
All right, well, let's leave that Philadelphus and the lovely Abutilon that dangles above us.
Yes, a gorgeous.
What variety is that one?
It's one I got as Goblin, but I'm not altogether sure that the name is correct. But anyhow, it's a nice plant.
Again, mooching through your paths. Oh, here's that Philadelphus again. Let's have a sniff. Ah, yes, the most beautiful fragrance. Massive flowers too, aren't they?
It is a very showy species, or cultivar, but I have to say, just ahead of us is another Philadelphus, and if you want perfume, this is the one to plant. So let's go and have a look at it.
Okay, and here we are. Now, remember that when we did a walk through your garden with Alexandra of the middle-sized garden, she was quite fascinated by your paths that you've chosen gravel and wood chip so that they are insubstantial, so they can wax and wane as the plants grow.
Yes, exactly. You don't necessarily have to pull a plant out, you just move the path.
Oh, I can smell it now.
Yeah, can you smell that?
Yeah. All right, let me park the camera and let's chat about this.
All right, good.
Ah.
Isn't that something?
It's just a cloud of heavenly fragrance.
It is beautiful. And this is Philadelphus mexicanus. And in our climate, at least, it's basically evergreen. But it can be an awkward shrub to use.
It's an awkward youth.
Yes. The problem with it is it has this very lax, floppy growth. So it tends to flop all over the place. And for many years, I had an Acacia melanoxylon growing up in the corner of this garden here, a youngish tree. And I kept throwing the branches of the Philadelphus up through the acacia, and it used to hang out like an amazing sort of curtain. Unfortunately, in a storm, the whole lot came down, so I lost the acacia that it was growing through, and now it has to find its way through the other shrubs around it. And so every so often I have to hack it back to near ground level because it'll eventually swamp and take over half the garden if I allow it to. So probably in another 12-18 months, probably after next year's flowering, it's going to become too bulky, and so I'll have to get right in there and cut it all back down to ground level and start it off again. But it is the most fabulous scent.
So where's it from?
Mexico. That's why it's called Philadelphus mexicanus.
You've got pollen on your nose.
Oh dear, I got pollinated.
Trying to do naughty things with your nose. Now, you mentioned it's evergreen, basically in our climate, but it only would flower at one point in the year, I'm presuming.
Oh yes, it's an early to midsummer flowerer. It goes over quite a prolonged period, so it has a nice long flowering period. And the perfume is so exquisite that you'd forgive it even if it didn't have a particularly long flowering period. So it's definitely worthwhile finding a spot for. It could be particularly good as an espalier. You know, if you've got a large wall that you want to grow it along, it could look very good that way.
Which reminds me, we made a video of your footage from Spain, and there was that wall of plumbago.
Oh,
so you
stunning.
can kind of do the same thing with this.
You could. It would make a very good wall shrub. And in fact, I think in England it's often used that way because it's not rock hardy to the cold. But here it's pretty indestructible. So we could grow it almost anywhere. Full sun through to semi-shade. Doesn't care about soil particularly. Wouldn't like a spot where it got wet feet. But apart from that, a very easygoing shrub.
There you go. All right, let's carry on our amble. And so our ramble now winds back behind the house, towards your sort of courtyardy area at the back, which is charmingly, perhaps lovingly called your tropical garden.
Yes, well, it certainly has that look about it, with big leafy plants, hopefully exuding tropical exuberance
in this less than tropical weather. And so here we are. So we've got the variegated Fuchsia,
doing its thing.
Many of our programs. And there is the small pond behind us there.
Yeah.
And as we move over here, we are in front of the wonderful Agapetes, which is also still, well, this one is still in bloom.
Yes, there's still flowers on the Agapetes. They've been going on for months and months and months. So they're quite pretty, and the honey eaters are still using them. So the little birds love these little red bell flowers.
Well, there we are, our early summer ramble around your garden. Although, as I said, less than summer-like weather.
Oh, well, it is Macedon, and we do have 4 seasons all in the one day.
We do indeed. Well, I hope you've loved this tour through the garden. We will do more. We'll do one perhaps in early autumn.
Yep.
And perhaps one in winter. And we should also do one in spring when the cockatoos aren't as noisy.
Yes.
To see all the early spring things. So I think we've missed a few seasons. So it might be more than 4 garden walks that we do.
Well, it doesn't matter. There's more than 4 seasons, I believe, in Australia anyway.
Oh, well, there you are. Well, if you want to know what we're doing next week, you'll have to hit subscribe.
And don't forget, if you've got a question for me, please put it in the comments below and we will answer it in our Monday shorts.
We will indeed. And remember, we post every Friday, and every plant that we've named in our ramble around the garden is in the text below. If you can't see it, just press read more and pa-ding, there they all will be. Well, Steve and Ryan, look forward to seeing you next week.
Yes, it should be another, well, let's hope it's a finer day next week, and it should be fun looking at some other planty thing.
Whatever it is, we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye all.